Okay, so, you know how rain ruins your day? Like, one afternoon of rain, and suddenly everyone's complaining. No plans. No going outside. The whole day is basically canceled. Now imagine being an ancient human. No roof guaranteed. No weather app. No raincoat waiting by the door. Just you. No signal. No rescue team versus a storm. That could last for weeks. And somehow, humanity survived. Not just survived, they actually engineered their way through it. Waterproof clothing, without a single machine. Fire, that stayed lit in the middle of a downpour. Entire ancient cities, with drainage systems, that still work today. And a flood story, so extreme, that nearly every culture on Earth still tells a version of it. So next time it rains for one afternoon, and you're mad about it, just wait till you hear what they went through. In the next 20 minutes, we're covering all of it. Let's get into it. Let's start with the most basic problem. Your body is not naturally rainproof. Get soaked long enough in cold weather, and hypothermia becomes a very real threat, even today. So early humans didn't just wear animal skins for warmth. They engineered them. Hides were scraped, stretched, and treated with animal fats and oils, which, believe it or not, made the material genuinely water-resistant. Not perfect, but a massive upgrade over bare skin. Then came the tailoring, and this part genuinely surprises people. Fitted, layered clothing, sleeves, hoods, overlapping panels, designed specifically to shed water instead of soaking it up. Basically the Ice Age version of a technical rain jacket. And it wasn't just about the rain itself. Wet ground was a genuine hazard too. A slip on a wet rock, a fall near a swollen river. This could genuinely end badly, with zero modern medicine to fall back on. So groups moved carefully, stuck together, and leaned on each other, literally and socially. Survival researchers actually point out something important here. A lot of prehistoric people who made it to old age only did because their group looked after them. Cooperation wasn't a nice bonus. In weather like this, it was the actual survival strategy. So, you're dry, you're not slipping into a river, but you're still standing outside in a storm. Time to find shelter. Caves get all the credit in the caveman stereotype, but here's the twist. Caves weren't a permanent home. They were more like an emergency shelter people used seasonally while moving around. Most of the time, people built their own shelters, and these were surprisingly sophisticated. Wooden frames, covered in hide or packed mud, built specifically to shed rainwater away from the structure. And here's the detail that trips people up. Many of these huts had a small smoke hole at the top, which meant people could keep a fire burning inside, even during a storm. Fire in a rainstorm sounds impossible, but it came down to preparation, not luck. Dry wood was gathered and stored well ahead of a storm, kept under overhangs or wrapped in bark. And once a fire was going, it was rarely allowed to fully go out, tended constantly, moved indoors, protected like it was worth more than anything else they owned. Because honestly, it kind of was. Losing your only fire source in a multi-day storm could be a genuine survival crisis. So, waterproof clothing, engineered shelters, fire management. Ancient humans had heavy rain mostly figured out. But what happens when the rain doesn't stop for weeks and entire rivers start rising? That's a whole different problem. Here's a plot twist. Ancient civilizations didn't just survive floods. Some of them actually needed them. Along the Nile and the Tigris and Euphrates, seasonal flooding deposited rich, fertile silt onto the farmland every single year. No flood, no fertile farmland, no massive early civilizations. It sounds backwards, but the flood was the farming system. Of course, this only worked if the flood was predictable. A surprise flood was still a disaster. So these early societies did something genuinely impressive. They started tracking the pattern. Calendars, flood markers, even early written records. A huge part of why writing itself developed was to keep track of exactly this. Predicting the water wasn't superstition. It was some of humanity's earliest applied science. But tracking the water is one thing. Actually controlling where it went, that required some seriously clever engineering. Here's a fact that genuinely blows people's minds when they hear it for the first time. On the island of Crete, the Minoan civilization built a stormwater drainage system roughly 4,000 years ago, and it was still doing its job better than some modern systems manage after a decade. And they weren't the only ones thinking this way. Over in the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-daro had covered drains running underneath the streets, connected to individual houses, an actual coordinated citywide drainage network, thousands of years before modern plumbing. Meanwhile, in flood-prone regions all over the world, communities took an entirely different approach. They just built up. Stilt houses, raised platforms, entire villages built above the expected flood line. Simple idea, genuinely effective. If the water's going to rise, just don't be down at water level. But no matter how good the engineering got, some floods were simply too big to plan around. And when something is that overwhelming, that far beyond human control, people tend to turn it into a story. Which brings us to one of the strangest patterns in all of human history. Mesopotamia has one. So does ancient India. So does China. So does Greece. Aboriginal Australian traditions have one. Aztec traditions have one. A massive flood. A warning. A chosen survivor. A boat. Animals saved. A fresh start for humanity. That exact structure shows up in cultures that had zero contact with each other, separated by oceans, by thousands of years. So what's actually going on here? One theory points to real, documented floods, the Tigris and Euphrates flooding Sumerian lands, monsoon surges hitting the Indus Valley, tsunamis reshaping Polynesian coastlines. Real disasters, retold and passed down until they became legend. There's an even bigger theory, too, that these stories might trace back to the end of the Ice Age itself, when melting glaciers raised sea levels by roughly 400 feet, swallowing entire coastlines people used to live on. Imagine watching the literal edge of the world disappear underwater over a few generations. You'd probably turn that into a legend too. The timelines don't all line up perfectly, so there's probably no single flood behind every story. But the pattern itself tells us something real. Surviving water this catastrophic left a mark on basically every early human society on Earth. So let's be real about what we just covered, because it's genuinely more impressive than it sounds. Ancient people engineered waterproof clothing without a single synthetic material. They kept fire alive indoors during storms that could last for days. They built citywide drainage systems that are, in some cases, still technically functional today. And when the water genuinely couldn't be beaten, they turned catastrophe into a story that basically every culture on Earth still tells in some form. No weather app, no forecast, just observation, cooperation, and stubborn engineering for thousands of years straight. Next time you're annoyed about forgetting your umbrella, maybe cut yourself some slack. It could be worse. So that's the real story of how humans survived heavy rain for thousands of years before umbrellas ever existed. Waterproof clothing, engineered shelters, citywide drainage older than most religions, and a shared flood story that shows up on nearly every continent on Earth. And honestly, a lot of what we still do today isn't that different. If your brain just got a little bigger, go ahead and subscribe, because next time, we're cracking open another ancient survival mystery you were probably never taught in school.